Hello everyone, welcome back to the Teaching Mom. My name is Wendy, and today I am going to try to do our birth story. Here's our little one. He's sleeping at the moment. I'm going to try to do this while my husband and the kids are gone to church. They are gone for youth night. Oopsie. So it's a little bit quieter here tonight. So I thought I would try to do the birth story. I've never did a birth story before. All of my other kids were born before I was doing YouTube. But so maybe I can give a little bit of, well, I think I've given a little bit of birth story, you know, through various videos before, but we have always wanted, well, I have always wanted to do home births. My youngest two siblings were born at home. And I was there for both of those. And so I always wanted to do that for myself. With Henry, we had tried to have a home birth, but something happened. Over the course of labor, I ended up being sent to the hospital. And doctors ended up just attributing it to the fact that my midwife at that time had me start pushing too early. And so they just attributed it to the fact that I was too tired, so I started bleeding too much. And by the time I got to the hospital, the people in the ambulance had told me if I wanted to push, if I wanted to just rest. So by the time, and that's what I did. And so by the time I got to the hospital, I was rested. And shortly after, Henry was born at the hospital, about an hour and a half. I probably hadn't even been there an hour and a half. Honestly, probably not. Anyways, and then Ella, I was going with a group of midwives that delivered at a birthing center. They didn't do home births, but they did it at a birthing center. So I was going to try to do that. Well, 2 months before she was born, maybe not even 2 months before she was born, that birthing center was technically owned by doctors via the hospital. And so I have learned since then that most of those ones end up getting shut down for various reasons. So the midwives were still allowed to deliver. I still had the midwives, but in the hospital. They could only do births in the hospital at that point, those midwives. So I did still have my midwives, and it was a natural birth except for the fact that they did induce me. They had decided she might be too small, so they wanted to induce me. But they only induced me 3 days early, and I think she was probably pretty much ready to come anyways. And so she was born in the hospital. They induced me 8 in the morning. She was born, I believe, about 3:20 or something like that afternoon. So other than being induced, was still completely natural birth. Henry's was natural. It just ended up not being at home like I wanted it to be. And then when I got pregnant with Austin, I knew somebody through our church. They didn't actually go to our church anymore, but I knew them through our church. They had used to go there. And and she had a home birth recently at that point. And so I asked her who her midwife was, because I knew that she had been at home in labor for 3 days. And a lot of people, if you're in labor that long, they'll panic and send you to the hospital. And this midwife didn't do that. And her baby was born at home. Everything was fine and all that. So I got the name of her midwife. And I went and met her. Loved her. Absolutely love her. So that is who I ended up going with for Austin's birth. And so he was born at home in the living room. And not going into too much detail about his delivery. I could go on about his delivery too. I really should maybe just do one as best as I can, even though it's been 2.5 years for his delivery. But he was born at home. I had gone into labor. I think my water had kind of broke about 10 o'clock the night before, but I wasn't positive. And I went to bed and I did sleep, and then I got up the next morning, and I think that's when it finished breaking at that point, and contractions kind of started. And so I texted my mom and she came, and well, she came a bit later. I texted my midwife, and she waited a few hours, and then she came, and he was born, I believe, 2 something in the afternoon. Well, this one, things actually went a bit faster with this one. But like I said before, little Austin was born on the living room floor, ended up on just the living room floor. We just laid she laid it was tablecloth. We've gone over that before. She laid a tablecloth down, some towels, and I delivered right there, and then they moved me to the bed, more comfortable to the bed after. So, anyways, so that's a little bit of background about previous births that I've had. For this one, this was the first birth that we actually decided to not have my mom be at. I loved having her at my other births. I really did. But we also we really liked the idea of it just being us with, just the midwives if they made it in time. Because I have heard a lot of people where the midwives don't make it. And I think my husband might panic a little bit if that happened. But I wouldn't. Honestly, the midwife did not make it for my mom's last one. My youngest brother was born at home. Us kids were all downstairs looking out the window waiting for the midwife to come. But where we lived, the midwife had, I think, almost 2 hours to get to our house. And my mom had relatively short deliveries. Mine have all been relatively short. And my mom also had relatively short, labor times. And so I think they knew there was a chance that she might not make it because it was 2 hours away. She was 2 hours away. So we were all downstairs looking out the window for her to come. And my dad was downstairs for a minute getting her some crushed ice. She walked out to the hallway and yelled for him. He ran up the stairs and literally caught my brother in the hallway where it happened. And I think she was still sitting in the hallway when the midwife got there a little bit later. But so it did not, it wouldn't have bothered me if the midwife hadn't made it in time. But she did. She was definitely here in time. And I think that definitely helped my husband and stuff. But anyway, so this was the first time we decided to not actually have my mom be here, to let it just be us. Just us, midwife, and the kids. And the midwife did have 2 assistants this time. She's been training some people. She actually just opened up a birthing center. So she is able to bring some more people in, train them, and work together with some other midwives. But I wanted to have at home. She does some at the birthing center, some at home still. And so it was just me, my husband, the kids. And as a matter of fact, this was actually Friday before, I was having a lot of contractions. And I actually was not positive they were contractions because it was mostly bothering in my back that was really being the problem. It was either Thursday or Friday. I actually can't remember. I think it was Friday though. And so I was texting my mom about it, and she was like, "That almost sounds like back labor to me." She's like, "The baby might be turned the wrong way." So I tried being on my hands and knees, and it would help while I was in that position, and it would help for a little bit afterwards, but I couldn't stay there. I have trouble being on my hands and knees for too long of a period. I've actually never really been able to be on my hands and knees when I'm in labor with the baby so low, and I think part of it's because I'm so little, and my babies all tend to have kind of big heads. So I don't know, I think it's just too much pressure on my pelvis, and it makes my legs wobbly. But so like if I tried being on my hands and knees on the bed, and it helped while I was in that position. I just couldn't stay there for very long. And so I ended up texting my midwife to see what she thought. And so she told me, she said, well, if you're having trouble being on your hands and knees, she said, that probably is what it is. And that the baby was pressing too much on my back. She said, if you're having trouble being on your hands and knees, she told me to try laying on my left side and putting a whole bunch of pillows between my legs, and to stay that way for anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. So I ended up staying that way for about an hour. I almost fell asleep because it started to feel better. But I was probably only that way for about 10 or 15 minutes. and I'm pretty sure I felt him just flip around. I don't think he was head up, but I think he was pressing against my back, like his mouth was against my spine or something. Mouth or nose or something was pressing against my spine or something. So I'm pretty sure that I felt him flip around to face the other direction. It's just the way it felt. And then I started to feel better. I laid there for an hour, and then I was able to get up and go make me something to eat and all, and things fizzled out, and I was able to sleep pretty good that night. Saturday I didn't have I had a few contractions on Saturday, but nothing big. Mostly seemed more like Braxton Hicks. And then Saturday, actually I had several contractions Saturday night. We had bingo night at church that night, and I had opted not to go, but my husband and his friend that's staying with us, his uncle that's staying with us, they had took all the kids and went to bingo night, except for little Austin. He had fell asleep before it was time to go, so he was here with me asleep. And they went to bingo night, and about an hour before they came home, I actually had several contractions for that hour, and I actually started timing them, and I actually suggested that maybe I should go to the hospital at one point. That the app did, but I wasn't really worried about what the app said, because for one, I wasn't going to go to the hospital anyways. I ended up just calling the midwife, but I was just looking at the timer. I didn't care what it told me about whether I should go or not. And so, but like, it told me that shortly before he got home. I said, well, I'm having some contractions, but I don't know. I said, I'm going to lay down now, because I had been busy doing some things while he was gone, some things that I had wanted to get done. I recorded a video and did some other things, reading and some things like that. So I said, I'm going to lay down and see what happens, because if you're up and doing things when you're having contractions, then if you lay down and things change, then you know that you're not in labor. And vice versa, if you're laying down and you're having contractions, get up and do stuff. If things stay the same, you know whether you're in labor. So I laid down, and after that, I only had maybe like 2 more contractions. And then I went to sleep, and I slept so good that night. I hadn't slept that good in a long time. So I went to bed, went to church the next morning. I think I had maybe 2 contractions during church. And then the rest of the day, I was fine. I didn't feel any. I had energy. I was up and doing things. Monday, again, nothing. And then Tuesday, dog's peeking in at me. Tuesday, I woke up, my alarm tends to go off at 4:30, and then I may get up at that point and do some things, take sure, depends on how I feel, how much energy I have. And I mean, even before the pregnancy, depending on how much energy I have, because of different kids being up at various times of the night. I'm still at the point where I have kids that wake up sometimes during the night and have to be lulled back to sleep and stuff like that. And then during pregnancy, if my back was bothering me, or if I just had to keep getting up to go to the bathroom, different things like that. So my alarm goes off at 4:30. Maybe I get up, maybe I don't. But I was having trouble. I couldn't get myself to go back to sleep. So, and I was feeling like I was having kind of big, like cramps. So I was like, maybe I need to go to the bathroom. So I got up and I went, and I did go to the bathroom, and I was like, I just don't feel like going back to bed. Everybody else was still asleep, so I took a shower. That helped me feel a little bit better. And so then I just went to the kitchen and started cleaning up the kitchen. I washed the dishes from the night before. I made raspberry tea. I made lemonade. And fixed my husband's lunchbox. And then he got up about 6:30. And I told him, I said, and I was still having some cramps at the time, but I was being able to do stuff. They weren't being too bad. And I was like, I think these are contractions. And with cramps, that let me know they're probably real ones. But I know that, sometimes you can have that for a couple of days. So he got up at 6:30, get ready for work. And I told him, I said, well, you going to work? I said, but I might have to call you and tell you to come home. We'll see. And so he left. He went to work. And then I started just doing some other things around the house, picking odds and ends things up, doing laundry. And they just kept getting closer and closer together. I started timing them, and they were being... First couple were that I timed were 10 minutes apart, and then they were almost all being 7 minutes apart. And I was having a lot of pressure. I was trying to move around. I tried sitting through some of them. I tried just walking around the house. Like I was literally just walking laps around my house somewhat. And I had a chair in the middle of my floor in my room. I was even just walking some around in my room, doing some things. And I would stop and lean on the chair whenever a contraction came. And I had to lean on the chair or something. If I was in the kitchen, I had to lean on the counter or use a door jamb, depending on where I was. Because between the contraction, the cramps, and it was a lot of pressure being put on my pelvis, I guess. Where the baby has to come out through the pelvic bone. Anyways, and so it was a lot of pressure, and my legs were actually being kind of wobbly. And I know with all of my other deliveries, my legs would not get wobbly until it was time to push the baby out. But these were just contractions. I was not feeling the need to push, but there was definitely pressure, and it was kind of making my legs a bit wobbly. But I noticed that when I sat down, the contractions would get further apart, but they were not being easier. When I did have them, they were not being easier. So I was like, I might as well keep them going then. So I started walking around and stuff. And I'll put a little clip in here. Once I realized, I think I'm definitely in labor, then I texted my husband and said, I think you need to come home. I texted the midwife and told her what had been happening and said, I just told my husband I think he needs to come home. And so she was like, okay. And she told me that, because I told her there was 7 minutes apart. She was like, okay. She called me. She talked to me some, asked me some questions. She said, okay. She said, well, I'm heading to the office. She said, to the birth center. She said, I've got a few appointments this morning. She said, I'm going to go try to do some of those and reschedule some stuff for later. She said, but you let me know if they get to be closer together. I was like, okay. So did that. My husband called me when he was on his way home. And I had the kids start doing some things to help me out. So I had, in my room is usually where I keep my clothes racks, where I dry clothes. But I knew that if I was going to be walking around and stuff and more and having the baby in my bedroom, I wasn't going to be using those for a couple of days. So I wanted to get them put away. So I hadn't folded the laundry from the day before yet. So I had the kids, I told Henry, and the other two started helping him. I sat on the edge of the bed and I had him bring me laundry. And I folded it and they helped me put it all away. And then when Austin got home, I had him take those and just put them in his office for now. I think one of them ended up in the living room at some point. But I had him do that. And then since I was still trying to be moving around, keep things going and whatnot, but I was still timing contractions, walking around and stopping, trying not to overdo myself, but do things. We got the bed ready. We took the sheets and stuff off, put new sheet on, put one of the tablecloths on it, then put the sheets that had been on the bed, I put those on again. That way I'd have the cleaner pair later. And I brought all the stuff that I had in the playpen for delivery time. I had my husband, I can't remember if the folding table was in here already or not, but I had my husband put that in one spot. And then we just put all the stuff that had been in the playpen that I knew was for delivery time on that. And then probably by then, some of the contractions were being about 5 to 3 minutes apart. But then I was also still having some that were more like 7 to 10. It just depended. So the midwife called to check on me again. And I told her that because I had just been thinking that I should text her and tell her that anyways. And she was like, okay. She said, well, I just finished 2 appointments. She said, and I've rescheduled other stuff for the rest of the afternoon. She said, we're getting ready to head your way. So they came. They got here, I would say, close to 11 when they got here. And so it was close to 11 when they got here. They brought their stuff in, organized their stuff and the stuff that I had where they wanted it, checked me out. When she checked me, for people that know what these things mean, I was at that point, my notes are in my phone. So I might be missing some things, but my notes are in my phone, and that's what I used to record. So I should have written some of this down on a separate piece of paper for this. But I believe I was 8 centimeters dilated 95% effaced. And she said I'm forgetting the term for this, but she said she could tell the baby's head was at a, what do they call it? A -1, close to the -2, which means almost ready to, that has to do with where his head is inside my pelvis, inside the pelvic bone. And -2 means ready to come out. Means they're totally locked in. So he was close to the -2 at that point. And so she's like, yeah, it's not gonna be long. She's like, it's definitely not gonna be long. By the time she got here, I didn't really feel like I could stand much anymore. And she did not have to ask much about when I was having contractions. When I had Austin, she would occasionally have to ask me, until it got really, really close to him being born. She had to ask me, was I having a contraction sometimes? She didn't have to ask me because I was actually moaning a little bit during some of the contractions. Not too bad, but it was definitely but so during all that, she checked me. Her and her 2 assistants were in here with me. They were both sweet girls too. I love them. And my husband he kept coming in here to check on me, but he was also keeping the kids entertained. So I think Henry was playing some games, and the other 2 ended up mostly watching TV in Austin's office. And then it was right about close to 12 o'clock, but not quite 12. It was probably like 11:50, 11:55. The midwife was like, she's like, I think we need to change your position a little bit. Because I was sitting on the bed with my legs out. I know you can't see this, but I didn't really want to lay down, but I think I needed to. Or I needed to be on my hands and knees. And she did suggest that a couple of times. But even just sitting here, my legs were shaking during contractions. So I was like, I don't think I could be on my knees. And so they ended up bringing the peanut ball in. And she had me lay on my left side. She told me, she said she felt like the baby needed a little bit of help getting himself down in there the rest of the way. She felt like other than that, I was ready. So they brought the peanut ball in, had me lay on my left side. And I'd never seen the peanut ball before. I did not realize how big that thing was. But it was huge, and I felt like it definitely made one of my legs go up really high, which made it so that the baby could, I guess, what they say, dive down the rest of the way. Anyways, and it was probably my second contraction with that between my legs that I felt my water break. And I was like, and then as soon as I could, I said, my water broke. And she was like, oh, she said, did you feel a little pop? I said, no, but I'm wet. I was like, I could tell water had gone everywhere. They did have a towel underneath me, so the sheet didn't get wet. They had a couple of towels underneath me. Plus, we had we had already put some of the, I don't know what you want to call them, the pads on the bed, pee pads for the doggies, right? That was basically what I had bought. It's the same thing. And that's just what my brain wants to call them. But I know that's not the technical name for them. Anyways, but they had some of those down, plus a couple of towels under me. So they were able to move some of those and, clean that up some. And then she did put the peanut ball back to help a little bit more. And at that point, my husband peeked in. I was like, everything okay? And then he was like, do you want me? And I couldn't talk, but I was like this. Well, he missed it. I think he thought I was just waving at him at first. So he almost missed that. But Sheila could see me better, for one, from where he was. She could see me better. She said, I think she wants you in here now. So he said, okay. He stuck his head back out and told Henry to go and watch TV with the other 2 to watch them and make sure they were okay. And then he came in, and I think it was probably, if not the next contraction, it was the one after that I started to push. And she had been telling me, she was like, tell me when you're ready to push. Well, I couldn't tell her. The contractions, and I was having to moan through contractions. I definitely moaned some during the pushing phase as well. And I had a hold of Austin's hands, and I was still on my side. And I was just like, And anyways, and then I probably only pushed through 2, maybe 3 contractions. and then his head came out. Next contraction, I believe his shoulders came out, and she adjusted my position a little bit to help get his shoulders in the right place. And I had heard her say, "There's just the cord. The cord was wrapped around his neck once, but I heard her say that. She said, but it's not tight." So I knew nothing to worry about there. I knew that one of my brothers had the cord wrapped around his neck twice, and his wasn't tight. He was perfectly fine. So I knew that that's technically normal to have the cord wrapped at least once. So that didn't worry me. But she had me turn a little bit more onto my back she said to help rotate his shoulders for coming out. So at that point, I wasn't on my side anymore, but I still had a hold of Austin's hand. So I think my side was maybe still turned a little bit because I was still clinging to Austin, because it did. I mean, I remember with the other three that, yes, even though my legs would get shaky come push time, I don't remember it being painful. And this one, honestly, actually, it felt painful. But now I'm okay with it. It was well worth it. It was definitely well worth it. But that was probably the first time that I've actually really felt like it was painful. But then once his shoulders were out, it was easier, of course. The next contraction was much easier. He just kind of slid out with the next one. And as I actually did not see her adjust the cord, but I'm sure she did. Probably as soon as he was done, she flipped him and lifted him up onto my stomach, and I could tell it was a boy right away. So I was the one to say it. I don't know if Austin had actually noticed it at that point yet, but when she picked him up to put him on my stomach, I could see him really good. So I said, "Oh boy." And so then, of course, my hands had the baby. I wasn't holding on to Austin anymore at that point. I had a hold of the baby, and they let me rest for a good little bit. She kept checking my stomach, checking him a little bit. One of the assistants at that point pretty much focused on him, checking him occasionally, suctioning out his throat and stuff like that. She actually did that several times. And then and so once he was out, he had just come out, just been laid on me, and we heard Austin's mom out in the hallway. And we could hear the kids going berserk because Granny was here. Her and his uncle that's staying with us has been working with her on some landscaping jobs. So she had been bringing him home. They'd finished working. She was bringing him home. She knew I was in labor, so she wasn't planning to stick around, but she wanted to tell Austin, ask if we needed anything. And so we could hear her out there. And so he went out to the hallway, and I could hear them. And she was like, "Okay." She said, "Well, I'm dirty." She said, "So I'm not going to stay anyways." She said, "I'm all sweaty and stuff." She said, "So I'm going to go home." And she yelled to me that she loved me and all. So that was sweet. So he then got the kids resettled, doing stuff. Well, he let them come in one at a time to take a peek at him real quick. But the placenta hadn't come out yet. So he then just got them resituated with doing stuff. And he kept coming and checking on me. And so he was born, I believe it was 11:50, 11:55 that she put me on the peanut ball. Because she told me, I wasn't really looking at the time then, but she told me later that he was born 20 minutes later. And I know that he was born at 12:15 exact. One of the other assistants had said he was born at 12:15 and 4 seconds. So 12:15. So it was about 11:50, 11:55 that she put me on the peanut ball. And that just totally did the trick of making things happen. So I probably definitely had to lay down so that I wasn't sitting on him. But it was, so I mean, that was the main part of the story. The placenta was delivered about 20 minutes later after he was born. And we didn't really do a whole lot to make that happen. I can't remember if I nursed him before or what. Because she had said that, if he started moving around and nuzzling, then I could nurse him because that could actually help. That can help with the contractions for getting your uterus to go back where it is, and that's what makes the placenta come out. So your uterus to go back where it needs to be. And that's what makes the placenta come out. But I cannot remember if I actually ended up nursing him or if it came out first. That's something I can't remember. And then, so shortly after the placenta came out, they were checking that. And then they, of course, I did nurse him. I nursed him one side. And then they went ahead and took him to do his weight and all that stuff. And then he weighed 7 pounds, 5 ounces. I do not remember. I'm pretty sure I've said it on a video before, but my other 3 all weighed 6 pounds, 2 ounces. All 3 of them. I'm sure that's probably like almost never heard of for somebody to have all babies weighing the same thing. But my first 3 did all weigh 6 pounds, 2 ounces. So for this one to be 7 pounds, 5 ounces tells me why it was a bit more painful. And, you know, just knowing that reason of why it felt more painful, it's like, okay, well, you know, this makes sense. And I don't know, it just made sense and I'm okay with it. I'm definitely okay with it. But my husband laughed and he told me later, he said, that's the loudest I've ever heard you get. But one of the assistants told me later, she said, that was nothing. She said, if that's the loudest you've ever been during labor, she said, that's nothing to compare to some of the things I've heard with women in labor. But I don't know. And I honestly couldn't really remember how much noise I make when I had the first 3. But my mom did say that the most she'd ever really heard me do was like groan a little bit, a little groan. And I know that I was definitely doing more than that. But I mean, I still didn't get loud because for one, I didn't want to scare the kids. I knew that they were content doing something, watching stuff. I didn't want to scare them for one. So I definitely, even if it had been that painful, I don't think I would have been able to let myself do that. I wouldn't have wanted to scare them. You want to say hi? You want to say hi? Oh. He's precious. Yeah. And everybody says he looks like his sister. But, so that is the main story of our little Jace here. And we actually had a different boy's name picked out. But we did not realize until we were actually sitting there talking about it after he was born. We did not realize that we both wanted 2 different spellings. And neither one of us really wanted to change our spelling for that name. So then we were like, well, then what do we do? Do we change it? Anyways, and so my husband started looking at boy names again. And he come with Jace. And I was like, oh, that's not bad. And then, but we couldn't really think what to go with it. And he was like, well, do you have a different name in mind? And I was like, well, the only other name that I could think of would be Wyatt. I said, I've always liked the name Wyatt ever since I read it in a book. And then I was like, wait a minute. I was like, those actually sound pretty good together. So he's our little Jace Wyatt. We both just really like that name. Once I had said it and Austin was like, oh, that does sound good. So yeah, that's who this is. And once the placenta had come out, then and they cleaned that up, put that away. Then we let the kids come in and see him again for just a little bit longer. And then, of course, this is 12:15. So by now it's lunchtime and they're hungry. So Austin went ahead to make them lunch while the midwife was checking the baby, and cleaning things up and whatnot. So he did that, and our little Austin fell asleep in his lunch. It had apparently been a big day. He fell asleep in his lunch. It was probably 1 something by then, because 1 or almost 2, because right before the midwife left, and she left at, I believe, 2 something. They stayed long enough to get me into the bathroom once and into, change of clothes and lay down. She had me go ahead and take some Tylenol. She had me eat a couple of crackers and then take some Tylenol. She didn't want me taking on an empty stomach. And then they went ahead and headed on out. Right before that was when I saw Austin carrying little Austin into the kids' room, because there's a door connecting our rooms. And I saw him carrying him in, and he just laid him on Henry's bed for a while. And he slept there. Apparently a big enough day. He slept there for a couple of hours. And then it was probably about 5 something when he woke up enough that he needed his mommy for a minute. So Austin brought him in here, and he kind of snuggled up against my shoulder a little bit and went right back to sleep. And he stayed that way until about 1 o'clock in the morning. He stayed there. Well, I mean, he would wake up occasionally, adjust himself a little bit, and go back to sleep. And he stayed that way until about 1 o'clock in the morning. This one was also awake at that time for feedings and stuff. So Austin had fell asleep. He was asleep by then. So I was the only one awake at 1 o'clock in the morning with the 2 babies. But it was fine. I knew that that I was going to want Austin to be awake with the kids during the day the next day, because he wasn't planning to go to work the next day because I wasn't supposed to be by myself yet. And so I wanted him to be able to be awake with them the next day if I felt like I needed to take a nap, and I was having to be awake with this one at that point anyway. So I just put something on the TV for little Austin to watch, and I think I did end up going to get him a snack. Ouch, like just a couple of crackers or something. So did that, and then he laid here and watched TV. I took care of the baby, and then he probably went back to sleep around 4 or so. Somewhere around 4, I think little Austin went back to sleep. And this one was actually asleep at that point. I was able to lay him in his little cradle next to me, bassinet. And I was actually able to lay down and go to sleep for a couple of hours, which was nice. So then I was awake the next day. I don't remember if I actually took a nap the next day or not, but it was, so that was the majority of our day. Once she'd left, I had those 2 crackers. I think I ate a handful of peanuts a little bit later, and Austin made me a couple pot pies for supper. So I did eat again before nighttime, and that was pretty much what we did. The kids didn't actually get to hold him until the next day, was when I let them do that. They woke up and we gave them their little presents. I don't know, that's something I've always done. When a new one is born, the others get a little present, and it's usually something baby related, to an extent. Like this time, I'll probably try to show pictures. This time they all got shirts that technically they're shirts with Xbox controllers on them, technically. And they say level up. But so, they all leveled up for having another sibling, especially little Austin. But so they all got one of those, different sizes. Little Austin's looks like a nightgown on him, but that's all right. He loves to wear it. And then Henry, we had got a little dice game that I thought would be kind of cool. It looked kind of cool, similar to like Kismet or Yahtzee or something like that. Ouch. And so I thought that would be kind of cool for him to learn how to play, and then maybe he'd teach Ella how to play it. And then the other 2 both got cuddle packs for dolls. And the picture that I have of Austin with he actually has his stuffed dinosaur in it. So I had asked Ella to go get him a doll, and she come back with this itty bitty doll. I'm like, no, that's gonna fall out of it. That one's too little. But she found a good doll to put in hers, but she couldn't find any of her other dolls the right size. But I saw his dinosaur. I was like, give me that. And so I stuck that in there. And he wore that thing almost all day. So probably when I start wearing him in the cuddle pack or baby wrap more often is when they'll really start to wear those more, because they'll want to be copying mommy. I've only used the wrap twice so far right now, but the point I'm recording this, it is a week later. So this is the following Wednesday, and I seem to have a bit of a runny nose. But so that is the majority of his birth story. Things have gone really well. He weighed 7 pounds 5 ounces. I thought Ella was my shortest at 19 3/4 inches, but somehow I must have missed, I haven't wrote down, but I must have missed the fact that little Austin was 19.5 inches. So up until now he was my shortest, but they are now tied for shortest. So even though he weighed over a pound more than the other 3, he was shortest with Austin. They were both 19.5 inches. Am I done? And so he was definitely
even though shorter, bigger, you know, so chunkier. Definitely my chunkiest. Up till now, I thought that had been Ella, but I guess not. I guess that was Austin was my chunkiest up until now. But when the midwife's assistant came to check on us the next day, he was down to 6 pounds, 14 ounces, which I'm sure most people watching this probably know that that's normal for them to lose some weight. They lose all that water weight that they had when they were born. And so he was down to 6 pounds, 14 ounces for that visit. The next day, he had his first visit at the doctor's office. My mother-in-law drove us up for that, and he was up to 7 pounds at that point. So within the space of a day, of less than a day, he went from 6 pounds, 14 ounces back up to 7 pounds. So I knew that he was already gaining at that point. And that is actually something that they were watching with him, wanted to really watch with him, because they noticed right after he was born, he does have a tongue tie. And my pediatrician actually did say that it's actually a bit more of a tongue tie than what they sometimes normally see. But he says he agreed with the midwife that, and I'm glad of this, because I've heard of so many kids that have to have that clipped, and it's like, but I thought that baby was fine. Why are we messing with it? You know, I hate to do procedures on a baby that whatever it is not bothering them and not slowing them down. It's like, I don't see the point in putting them through that. So, but they've all agreed that as long as it's not affecting his eating and weight gain, then there's no point in doing anything with it. It's not going to bother him that much. So, so his doctor, he even put his finger in his mouth to see how he did, and he was steadily sucking on it, trying to get something out of that finger. And then the midwife came, well, the midwife's assistant, she came to see us again yesterday for our 1 week visit, and he was then at 7 pounds, 11 ounces. So he came back up to his birth weight in the space of a week, came back up to his birth weight, and gained 6 ounces. So I think we're definitely doing good and don't have to worry about that. He does have a 1 week appointment with the pediatrician. That's the only thing that I find a little bit annoying, is that even though the midwife is doing all those checks on him, most pediatricians still want to see them anyways, just because they were born at home and don't have those first 3 things at the hospital. And honestly, I think my actual pediatrician would be fine without it, because he's a great guy. I love him. I think he would just let us be fine until after the 6 weeks, when I don't need to be seeing the midwife anymore. Because up until the 6 week visit, every time she's checking me, she checks him too. Because, you know, especially if you're breastfeeding, then you're still super connected. And things that are affecting him are going to affect me. Things that are affecting me are going to affect him. So every time she's checking me, she's checking him. And I think my pediatrician would be fine going with that and just looking at her stuff. But his office is connected to the hospital as well. So I think probably his bosses would probably say something, or I don't know. So I still have to take him in for all of those checkups, even though he's technically already had them with the midwife. But so that's a bit annoying, but to be able to be at home and not be in the hospital system is worth it. It's so worth it for me. I like it so much better. Because even though I did not have bad experiences, my first 2 that were born in the hospital, I did not have bad experiences with them. For one, with Ella, I still had the midwives. Of course, it was mostly doctors afterwards. The midwife came to check on me, but it was all doctors for her. And the only thing I didn't like about that one was they said they had to take her up and put her under the light for a little while. So they took her to the nursery during the nighttime when I was just by myself and I couldn't go with her. And I did not like that. And they were gone. Said they were only going to have her gone for like an hour. And I'm pretty sure it was at least 2. So that had really bothered me. But other than that, that wasn't bad. And the time in the hospital with Henry wasn't bad either, but I just wanted to be at home. And I know that I did stay in the hospital at least 2 nights with Henry. I think it was only 1 with Ella. But it was 2 nights with Henry at least. And I just so bad wanted to be at home. So for me, it's definitely much better to, I'd much rather take some extra trips to the doctor's office to let them verify for themselves that his weight and all that is fine in order to be able to be at peace at home. So for me, that's worth it. So that's our birth story. Hopefully I covered everything. Yeah. Hopefully I covered everything. I think I did. Just about. But if you got any questions, anything you can think of that maybe I didn't touch on, go ahead and ask. Feel free to ask questions, and I will try to answer them to the best that I can for what I know, what I remember. So hope you enjoyed this video, the story of our little Jace entering the world. So thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.